Okay, so last time we just talked about, how do you handle the pencil? How do you wield this thing? How do you get nice straight lines, curved lines, whatever, nice smooth lines. Want to talk about just some basic draftsmanship tools. Guys people who watch my videos in the past are probably going to have seen a bunch of these already. But I got a few new things to share, and at least I might be able to get this all into one episode as opposed to scattered, because I got hundreds of episodes, and I don't know. Sometimes I think I should delete some of those episodes, but whatever. Anyway, okay, so some different drafting tools that you can use. Okay, first of all, let me just. First one that I think is the best one I'm going to talk about is not a wireframe. I'm going to call it a coil frame. So if you want to do, let's say, a sphere, a coil frame sphere, then it's just a sphere made out of a coil, right? And you can make people out of coils. You can use it to make the torso. You make arms and legs, and being able to draw coils goes a long way. You can do a lot with just a coil. Now, there's some funny things that go on with a coil frame. I just want to show you in the case of, let's say, when I draw a donut. So I'm going to show you this weird thing. Here, watch this. See how my pencil is going around in a counterclockwise fashion? Watch this. It's going to go clockwise, and then it's going to reverse. And then it's going to go the other way. All right. Now, I'm going to show you something. Let me see if I got a pair of headphones over here. And these headphones have a very special kind of cable. You've probably seen it on a telephone. All right. So here we are. I've got myself a headphone cable. And the spiral cable, well, what happens when you look at this spiral cable from the side, right? It looks like a zigzag. It doesn't look like it's round at all. When you look at it, this way, straight on, it becomes circular. So when you turn the thing into a donut, like this, kind of wish there was a proper background, maybe my shirt. Anyway, you're going to find that it's going to go from a zigzag to a circle, as it's going to be zigzag when you look at it across. It's going to become circular when it turns this way. So this is a transition that you have to deal with as the cable, turns around. And you can see here, it's become zigzag over here. It's become round up here. Something you got to deal with when you're dealing with the coil. Another thing I want to show you is that this coils have what I would call a handedness to them. There's a handedness. If we look at these coils, right? If we let's say I take my left hand, okay? Well, if I do my left hand and I say, hey, I'm gonna thumbs up, and I curl my fingers around here. If my fingers, if we follow the direction of the coil going around the way my fingers are going, meaning going around this way, going around and around this way, then if we follow the coil around going, around and around the direction of my fingers, it's going to move me, forward this way. This is a left-hand coil. A right-hand coil is the opposite. This is not a right-hand coil because, you see, if we follow... Actually, hang on, wait a minute. Yeah, if we follow this thing going around the direction my fingers are going, then it also goes. Does it also go up? No. Yeah, it doesn't go up. It goes in reverse. This is definitely a left-hand coil. Because here's the thing. If we go and we follow the coils around going the direction of my fingers, right, with my right hand, then it's going to go down. It's going to go opposite of my thumb. So this is definitely not a right-hand coil. This is a left-hand coil. Now this is going to become, the importance of handedness of a coil is going to become apparent when you try to draw, a coil in the form of a donut. Because this coil here, what's going to happen is I'm going to go around and around. Now it becomes a zigzag. And then, well, I was going counterclockwise. The center of this donut is going downwards. So I'm going to go around. Now it's zigzag. See this? I had to reverse the direction so that these coils, the insides of the coils, are always going down, going down, going down. And I had to reverse again. So this way, every time I reach the center, I'm always going down. And if we look at this, let's look at this coil through the external camera. Okay, looking at this coil through the external camera, if we follow the coil around, right, as we go around in this direction, you know, we go this way. So that means that this is a left-hand coil. This is a left-hand coil. You know, you can just tell anytime I put my fingers, you know, the far side of my fingers are going on the inside of this donut shape. So this is a left-hand coil. A right-hand coil is going to do the opposite. Now the center has to go upwards. So now I had to reverse it. And I had to reverse it again. So this is a right-hand coil, because when you look at this this coil, if we follow the coil going around in this direction, you know, with the center going up and going around, then it's going to move in this direction. See that? It's a left-hand coil. I mean, this is the right-hand coil. So you have to understand the handedness of your coil, because if you try to do something where you go, you know, clockwise, then you flatten out, and then you go clockwise again, then you've suddenly reversed the handedness. You've screwed up, and it's you know, that's not the way to do a coil. You have to be able to make the transition. There's a whole bunch of things that are going to go on. First of all, at the center, you're going to get a circle. In the middle, you're going to get zigzags, right? And in this here, it's going to become circular again. Then you're going to get zigzags a second time. So it's going to go around, around and around. Then it's here. Let's do this. Around and around. Then you see this? You're going to get loops that go from round to narrow. See, this is a narrow loop, right? You go from a round loop to a narrow loop to a zigzag to a reverse, you know, reversed narrow loops, and then back to round again. There are several transitions that you're going to have to deal with. Walking and chewing gum, you know? And that's not all. Over here, things are far away. Over here, things are closer. So that means that the zigzags here are going to have to be shorter, while the zigzags here are going to have to be larger. So it's going to have to go from large to small, reverse and large, getting larger and zigzag, and then reverse smaller. Lots of things you got to do all at once. Not something you're going to do overnight. Something that needs to be practiced over and over and over again. And that's not all. Just because you can go through the hoop in this direction, you need, let's get the, here we are. You need to be able to go in both directions. You need to be able to go this direction. You need to be able to go in that direction, you know. So I might be able to take, if this is a center down spiral, donut. Okay. Suddenly, you need to be able to reverse it. You need to be able to go both ways. You got to be able to go both ways, and then then you got to try the ones that go upwards. So in this case, center upwards. Ugh, hard. It's really hard. Walking and chewing gum, okay, or more like you know, playing a harmonica and riding a unicycle. Really, really difficult stuff. And maybe what you can do is, first thing you should do is maybe don't try and tackle the whole coil all at once. Do this. First, you're going to say, well, the inside's going to go like this. There, it's curving. Now it starts to straighten out. There, now I have straighten out. Now it starts to reverse. All right? Now it's reversing. Now it becomes circular. Now I draw the other side. See this? I'm drawing the outside of the donut. And then it begins to flatten out. And then the other side, the donut. Now I'm on the outside. Now I have to go to the top side. Now I reverse. Now I'm on the interior. See that? You need to be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You see how I'm reversing, you know, the curvature. You have to be able to flip the curve, and then you have to be able to deal with the size change of the curve, you know, because things are getting closer and further. And then you got to deal with the reversal that occurs. So you're doing so many things at once. I'm doing curvature reversals, I'm doing curvature size changes, and I'm flipping, you know, onto different parts of this donut to get this sense of depth. And then finally, the worst part of all, the most difficult part of all, is maintaining this center upward movement or center downward movement. It's gonna flip when you go in reverse, mind you. Oh boy. So now it's centered downwards when you know, go clockwise or counterclockwise on the circle. But difficult stuff. Difficult stuff. Looks easy, looks retardedly simple, but you know what? Don't say I didn't tell ya. Okay. And again, just because you can do the circle going around, you know, in this direction, doesn't mean that you can do a circle going this way, right? So that means you're going to have to practice, you know, going in all sorts of directions. You're going to have to practice what happens if you take a circle. What happens if we do this, you know, on a circular donut viewed from above? Then you're going to get that, right? Because you're always looking at things from the side. What happens if you have a circular donut, you know, when you're looking at it straight on? So you're going to get rounding, rounding. And you see that? I always have to keep reversing. You know, you might wind up practicing. You might wind up having to practice only a small portion, you know, just so that your brain doesn't fry. You know, you might just do this, you know, one small quarter. Then you'll do another small quarter. Break down the problem until you can go through an entire, you know, semicircle. You know, try a semicircle going, you know, this way. You need to practice the transitions at every key point. You know, that's a key point right here. This is another key point. This is another key point. There are 4 possible key points, and you're going to have to knit all 4 of these transitions together, going clockwise and counterclockwise and reversing the turn. So, tough shit. Really, really tough stuff to deal with. You know, I suggest you practice this, because then, you know, this is going to become the basic tool that you use for doing any kind of coil frame. You know, and here's the other thing. I was talking earlier in the previous episode about how you can draw circles. You know, you can kind of visualize a circle just by the movement of your hand, right? So, because I've got the paper trail running right now, you know, I can imagine. Well, I don't even have to imagine. You can see it, and I can sort of pre-draw something. I can freeze the paper trail off. You know, and then I can say, well, how do we want the person's body, right? So we look at the ellipse. You figure out how do you want to tilt his body. You know, do we want to see it from straight on? You know, do we want to see it from underneath? So these are things that you do. You know, you do the coil frame. You see that? I had to go from a circle to a flat. Then I have to reverse I had to reverse the coil, you know, to handle this torso. And the coil is just one way to show form, you know, because when you have a coil like this, okay, reversing again, you know, I make it look easy because I've practiced this so much. This is what I do in my warm-ups. I practice these coils. You know, this coil frame, the coil is only sticking to the outside of the surface. You know, it doesn't penetrate the surface. Then you can have, the silhouette. And this is the surface horizon. This is where the surface turns away from your eye, right? And I think a lot of artists make the mistake, I did too, they make the mistake of trying to train themselves to draw only only the surface horizon, only to draw the silhouette. They obsess over the silhouette because, this is the last thing that you generally see in a line drawing. All they want to see is just these outlines. But the coil frame gives you a lot more information, a lot more depth information as to how things are turning, how things are curving. I see this a lot. I see people, they draw a circle and then they just kind of they draw a cross on it. They don't realize that the cross, if I take a coil frame, okay, there, I've got a coil frame going this way. I'm going to just draw it in lightly. Whoops. Flatten, reverse it. 1, 2, flatten, reverse, reverse, reverse. You can just use portions of the coil frame. You're not drawing the whole thing. You can have another coil frame that goes around this way, all right? But I'm only going to draw a small piece of that coil frame. So, these guidelines that you're drawing on things, these are all part of the coil frame. So by practicing drawing things, by practicing something out as a coil frame, using your imagination to kind of memorize where your pencil's gone over, that will help you with your guidelines. That will help you with your divisions over the body. You need to visualize, this coil frame and where your hand has gone. So let's see some more stuff. Hang on. So yeah, you've got the coil frame. You've got this coil frame. You have the surface horizon. And the surface horizon is also something that shows overlap. See that little overlap right there? So the overlap is telling me that this region right here is sitting behind this object here. Right? You need to deal with line intersections. Right? Anytime you have one object sitting in front of another, you're going to have a couple of intersections because this is sitting in front of this. So, you'll do your coil frame. Okay, so round and around and around, flatten, reverse. Let me freeze the coil frame off. You're going to go and you're going to draw this. Now, I have the option of using paper trail and freezing things off. In your case, if you don't have paper trail or you're not using TV Paint, this is the software that I'm using. This is a specialized plugin that I haven't even released. Then you're going to have to use just light pencil strokes. Just use a light pencil stroke, and that becomes your paper trail. And now now that I have this coil frame, it's very easy for me to make divisions over the body. Right, but I have my surface horizon. This is the final line that people get to see. So the big mistake that people make is they go and they rush to final lines when they're only in the beginning. So and again, your coil frame is going to help you understand body divisions, how the leg's gonna turn this way or that. That's the surface horizon. Now, when it comes to dealing with something like tone, then, well, okay, you get your coil frame, you do your surface horizon, or your outline, your silhouette, whatever you call it, and then you're going to have to figure out, well, which way is the light coming from, right? So if the light's coming from a particular direction, then you're going to have to you're going to have to shadow the side, that is not exposed to the light, right? And this area, and that's because if we take a ball and we shine some light directly from above, then the ball here, the light's going to strike that, no problem. If we look at the surface here, though, right, if it's raining out and you take a piece of paper and you hold it sideways, right, the rain's just going to fall right past your piece of paper. It's not really going to strike it. If it does strike it, it'll just spread all the way down the side of the paper. It won't really wet a single drop. It'll just spread and dissipate all the way down the side. So on a sphere like this, lit directly from above, everything below this is going to fall into shadow. And There we are. You know, as the surface begins to turn away from the light, it's going to get darker and darker. All right? And when you look at a sphere, you know, that's lit kind of from an angle, then here, let me work in reverse. Let me just work dark to light. You're going to get something like this. Oops. Now, method behind my madness is, if you ever seen, you know, the moon, you know, the phases of the moon during different times of the month, you're going to get times when the moon, you see the moon from the side, or it is lit from the side like this, and you're going to get a straight transition like that. There are times when the moon is full, right, and there's no change at all. There are times when the moon looks like this. You're going to get a waxing and waning, right? Now, what that is if we take this moon and we slice it like a melon, you know, just cut it right in half. Now you can see how this light is falling off, right? It's all dependent on the direction that the light is striking your surface, the surface of the moon. Is the light striking it directly from the side? Is it striking it at an angle? Is it striking it dead on? It's going to change the shape of the shadow. Or you can have the reverse. You can take the same sphere, the same moon. That's no moon, it's a space station. And you can light it the other way around. So that's all there is really to lighting a sphere. Is that, you know, you understand how this shape here is formed. This form is a portion of an ellipse. It goes all the way through. And then you're going to get some amount of fall off, right? It's not suddenly dark. You want an even tone over everything. Okay. Now when it comes to a cylinder, cylinders are you know, shaded. It's even easier to shade a cylinder. It's the same thing. You know, you can have a phase of the moon, except that on a cylinder, it's always like this. It's always like that. And if you look at, let's say we take a hockey puck. All right, we're going to take a hockey puck, a little stumpy hockey puck, and then we're going to take a slightly larger hockey puck, and then I'm going to take another slightly larger hockey puck. And I'm going to stack these hockey pucks up. So these hockey pucks are really like a let me make that hockey puck a little bit wider. Okay, so these hockey pucks are all just a bunch of cylinders, and if you light them from the side, all right, you can change the direction of the light. So if the direction of the light is such that, you know, the light is coming from a little bit closer to the front, all right, you're going to get, look at that pattern. Look at that pattern that's formed. All right, you get this same curvature. You can take the moon and divide it, slice it up into a bunch of hockey pucks. You can imagine, you know, how this curvature is formed. You know, I can do it the other way around. All right, so now it's the opposite. Now I've gone and I've lit the far side of things. So that's really what's happening. It's just like a cylinder. It's just, you know, a whole bunch of stacked cylinders is a way to think of it. Okay. Yeah. So you always want to have a coil frame, you know, at least in your mind, or using paper trail or done with a light pencil. Later on, when you get better and better, you know, and you can see the shape without actually having to draw the coil frame, you know, then it no longer becomes a necessity. You draw the surface horizon, and then after that, you figure out where the lighting is, and you light it. You know, you got to figure out how's the light being distributed on this surface, and then you deal with the problem of lighting it. And then there's the question of, well, how do I get even tones? How do I stop things from blotching? And that's up to you to master from your tool, you know, from the medium that you choose, whether you're using graphite or you're using watercolor or you're using oils or this or that. You're going to have to find a different way to get an even tone. In my case, I'm using a computer program, using TV Paint, and I have a number of, well, if you've seen the behind the scenes episode, I've got a couple of foot pedals. Actually, today I just bought a third foot pedal. And I'm using the foot pedals to adjust the opacity of the stroke. So as I stamp on the pedal, you know, I can adjust the hardness of the charcoal. And then I got another pedal which allows me to adjust the radius, or I can use the, I can just twist, well, hang on. Let me bring on the other camera. You know, I can use the marker, and I can turn the marker on its side to get fine strokes, right? But, you know, I have a number of ways of dealing with things like brush thickness, either by, you know, either by using the pedal or by using my grip on the pencil, right? You know, turning this to the side, or I can use the you know, for pressure, for brush pressure, I can just push soft and then push harder and harder and harder, or I can just push, squish one of the pedals down and then use the pedal to control the thickness of the stroke. So I have independent, you know, I've got independent pedals which allow me to control, you know, the opacity and the diameter or width of my brush stroke. But you know, these are all things that I had to code and program to make it so that I could make these things. If you're working traditionally, then you just have to find a different way to hold your pencil. You'll have to, you know, choose the right medium for the job. You'll have to figure out, you know, what's going to give me, you know, a whole bunch of what's going to give me even tones. What's going to allow me to fill in, you know, a large region. If I have, you know, this shape, how am I going to be able to, you know, evenly fill this region right here? You know, I want to have a soft fill that doesn't go out of the lines. You're going to have to find out the tool and the way to hold your pencil that's going to give you that kind of control, right? It's going to give you this sort of precision. What tool is going to give you the ability to draw really, really fine lines? What tool and how do you have to use it if you want to get fat radial lines? And this is, you know, some of the practice you'll have to do. I practice holding this pencil. Here, let me get back to the external camera. Something more you have to do, you know, you have to practice with your medium. So how do I get fat lines that go in every direction, depending on how I rotate the stylus? And I have to hold the stylus in such a way that I can, you know, rotate it and still move, you know, using my arm and shoulder. I using my elbow and shoulder. What happens if I want to do, you know, things the other way around? Oh, now it changes things. See that? So it's changed. What happens if I just want to use a fine point? You know, if I'm using, if I'm doing that whole exercise with the coils, the coil frame. So let's get back to the coil frame. Let me unlock the. Okay, so if I have my coil frame going around, you know, a coil donut that's going around. If we look at this coil from the side, you know, coils from the side are going to have a fat stroke, right? So you're going to need fat strokes that also become, it might be fat here, but it'll have to be skinny here. Skinny here, right? Because like when you look through a, let's say, a paper tube, right? Paper tube's going to be fat. You're going to have a fat stroke from the side, but it's going to be skinny when you're looking at it. So I have to somehow go from to a fat stroke, and then I have to go from a fat stroke into a skinny stroke, right? So being able to do all this stuff at the same time and reverse your curve, it's really hard. It's really freaking hard. It's really hard, and it's something that even I am still practicing at. These are recent discoveries. These are recent things that I'm forcing myself to be able to do all at the same time. This is the control. This is how you theoretically get better. It's just this kind of crazy practice, and you put yourself through this sort of stuff, so that whenever it comes time that you use a coil frame, that you have the ability to to do everything right. You have the ability to take, now it has to become zigzag, has to go from round to zigzag to round and thin. Even now I'm still trying to figure out a way to hold this pencil properly. So that's what it is. Those are the real skills, real tangible skills that we can think of. It's not some weird airy-fairy fruity thing. It's a definite thing that you can work out. Anyway, catch you guys later.